Hello, you're watching World Talks on TVP World. My name is Sasha Fahrbach. We have formed the framework of a future deal with respect to Greenland, said President Donald Trump at Davos on Wednesday, unveiling a tentative agreement after talks with NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte. While military threats and tariffs have been shelved, for now at least, European leaders face pressing questions about sovereignty, Arctic security, and transatlantic trust. Same time, President Trump is promoting his controversial Board of Peace, the U.S.-led body for global conflict oversight that includes traditional allies and adversaries for a $1 billion permanent seat. To discuss and analyze all this and what it means, we're now joined by Oana Popescu, Director of Global Focus Center. Good to have you on TVP World.
Hi, Sasha. Thank you. Very good to be here.
There's so much information, but I want to condense it into what this says, this forever agreement, which we don't know very much about, come about in the last few hours of a very anxious few hours at Davos. What does this signal for this transatlantic relationship in your mind? Where does this put NATO now and the United States and the European Union?
Well, I think the first signal this gives is that perhaps we're seeing a more balanced transatlantic relationship, and I mean in favor of Europe, because we see that when Europe speaks with one voice and it puts up a united front, then it has actual negotiation margin with the United States. And I think Donald Trump essentially made that clear also in his speech at Davos, that he doesn't think Europe is strong enough, is consistent enough to be an equal partner to the US, and that is why the relationship should be imbalanced in his favor as far as he's concerned, as long as he feels that the US is giving more than it's taking. I think now a united Europe essentially shows to Donald Trump that we can be a force, and what we have managed to obtain, let's be clear, this is at least a temporary respite, but we don't know at this point if we have a final deal and if Greenland is just off the table. But we have at least a temporary respite, and we, I think the art of diplomacy made it possible for NATO Secretary General, with the backing of member states, to propose something that essentially expands the pie of possibilities that we are negotiating about. So the whole idea also with Ukraine, just as with Greenland for Europe, was to change the framing of the conversation, was to change the framing of what seemed to be the single possibility for mutual agreement with the US. And I think a new option has been presented to Donald Trump that might serve both his interests and not cross red lines. Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, you spoke of that this is now a sign of European unity. This is something that's another question. But let's say that pressure has had some kind of effect. But, if we listen to that speech yesterday, and it wasn't the first time that Donald Trump had been very dismissive of allies and partners. He repeatedly misidentified Iceland and Greenland, and in fact calling Greenland just a piece of ice, dismissing it, being disrespectful to allies, also their sacrifice of NATO, and all these different sort of litany of things. But, this is the kind of pattern. Is this now, in your view, something of a norm of how we negotiate with Donald Trump and the United States? And what does that do to American credibility? What does that do to trust if this is now the new norm in terms of negotiation with the world's most powerful nation?
Well, very probably. And it's not even new that this is a very transactional paradigm. It's a very kind of basic business-like approach where Washington essentially says, well, we are a model to the world. We have heard Donald Trump go on and on about how successful his first year in office was for America internally. So this is a model that should be replicated elsewhere as well. But we are also the ones that shoulder most of the burden for essentially the world staying alive. That was the argument. And in that case, first of all, America is right by default, because when America is strong, and prosperous and has its needs met, then the world is more stable. And secondly, whatever America wants is owed to it by virtue of the same logic. So I think this is basically what we have to keep in mind every time that we formulate our own negotiating position, which really doesn't have to fall within the same paradigm. I think it's perfectly fine for Europe to insist on opposing to Donald Trump a different paradigm, the one that we keep moving in, which is still based on international norms, principles, and values. And the two are not necessarily mutually exclusive. I do think that when we manage to present a value proposal that sounds fair, let's say, to the U.S. president, then we can very well stick to our position, and let's let's be clear-eyed. We don't have monolithic unity in Europe, and I think we'll see that when we talk about the Board of Peace and who joins and who doesn't. But we have enough unity, and I think we have enough strength, and this is still being built in a way that actually puts us in a pretty strong position vis-a-vis the United States.
Okay. You mentioned the Board of Peace there. I want to come in on that and jump in. That's supposed to be a sign. There's supposed to be something on the sidelines at Davos today on Thursday about something like 30 countries apparently signing. Some have already agreed to join this controversial club led by Donald Trump. with the likes of, we confirmed, Egypt, UAE, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Turkey, Jordan. The only European player there is Hungary so far. We've had pretty much a no from France. The German chancellor is not going to be present. We have a maybe from Italy, Poland as well, a sort of, let's say, a decision that's also not really quite clear, but it's also not fully yes. At the same time, if we're looking at this, where does this leave, well, the United Nations, for one, but what kind of impact could it have on things like in the future? The G7 is supposed to be this summer. The G20 is supposed to take place in the United States later in December this year. What does it have impact on those kind of formats?
Yeah, I think that is the essential question when it comes to this Board of Peace. And you know, frankly, we've all heard Mark Carney at Davos speak about how we entertained the illusion that that these institutions are still working, and they don't. And if we look at the UN, especially now that the US has withdrawn from so many of its bodies, I think we can see that quite clearly. However, the current system has a lot of coherence and has its logic. And all of these organizations and institutions have very clear mandates and have very clear functions. It is not clear at all how this Board of Peace would fit in. Does it try to replace any of these, or does it try to be an additional piece, and how would it be more functional? And the main danger in this is that the moment you start such an international organization with essentially buying your place as a permanent member, it definitely doesn't rest on equal status for all member states. It cannot rest on equal rights, since some invest more and some, I don't know if there will be room for those that don't or cannot invest this much. Does it leave them completely outside of this organization? And does it basically consolidate in systemic form that those who are able, those who are stronger, deserve more and can do more than those who are weaker? And essentially, and that is I think the ultimate question: does it undermine the current system of rules and regulations? Because that, I think, is why so many countries are either saying no or hesitating, because that's what we're looking at. Is it undermining what we have right now, and it's not really building a new and more just and more adequate world order, but it's actually contributing to just undoing what we have and throwing it into more chaos?
I mean, you mentioned about paradigm shifts as well. I mean, as I said, with the G20 in the United States, do you think that Trump is somehow angling this to replace that later on in the year? Is this his play? I mean, he's always come to the brinkmanship of things, then he turns around. Is this one of those times, or is this part of a, let's call it a long-term strategy with him?
Honestly, it would be hard to speculate what he's thinking. We see that he very often raises the stakes for negotiations, then is willing to lower them, confronted with opposition. He seems to have a long-term strategy in mind, which is basically to replace the existing order with one where countries are represented proportional to their strength and ability to be a player on the international scene, whether for better or for worse. So there does seem to be such a strategy. Does it have a short-term goal as well, connected to Gaza, is really not clear to me at this point. And I think everything is fluid, and we need to have more elements, and we need to give it a little bit more time before we can understand what this is.
All right, and we'll give it more time, and we'll talk about it more definitely in the next few days and weeks to come. Thank you so much. That was Oana Popescu, a Global Focus Center Director. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And thank you for watching World Talks, but stay right here for more news and commentary on TVP World. Goodbye.